1 million gross sales. Yes, that makes sense. Just 2 equals 4, 2 times 2, 4, 69, 70, 80, 6, 7. My eyes. I got Oh, hi. Didn't expect you to come here so soon. But I'm glad you're here because I figured out the whole thing. It's Matcha Latte. Okay, so dang, where do I start? Do you have the marketing document? You done? I will send you the link to the Google Doc with it. Yeah. Okay, perfect. But excuse how crazy I look. I've been working on this for a while now. But yeah, let's begin. So for the last decade, I'm sure you know, the K-pop industry sold us a narrative of unbroken exponential growth. But the data tells us a completely different story. We have hit a critical structural inflection point. In 2024, physical album sales in South Korea experienced a severe 19% drop. That led it to falling below the 100 million unit mark for the first time since the boom began. To put that into perspective, let's look at the number of million selling albums contracted. It went from 33 in 2023 to 20 in 2024. The industry is suffering from a crisis of oversaturation. Major labels attempted to brute force their market share by debuting group after group, completely fragmenting consumer attention. The wealth of the fandom has been spread too thin. But the drop in physical sales isn't just a financial issue, it's a symptom of a much deeper creative failure. It's a symptom of the industry losing its identity in a desperate bid for Western approval. To conquer the North American and European market, the major conglomerates fundamentally altered their production formulas. Historically, the genre thrived on chaos. It was a joyful, unpredictable, maximalist fusion of traditional elements, hip-hop, EDM, and complex song structures. But now, contemporary releases are increasingly outsourced to Western A&R networks, resulting in a linear, streamlined sound design strictly to appease the algorithms of Spotify. And then if we look at the linguistic shift, in 2015 the average song featured less than 20% English lyrics. By 2024 that number skyrockets to roughly 45%, with the top globally charting tracks on Spotify often being composed entirely in English. They are trying to beat the Western market industry at its own game by becoming indistinguishable from it. Which brings us to what I've dubbed, or what we have come to dub, the Matcha Latte problem. Consumer sentiment now is incredibly frustrated, and analysts and longtime fans have started comparing older eras of the genre to Korean fried chicken. It had a Western base for sure, but it was executed with a fiercely distinct cultural specific identity and an unmistakable edge. Modern releases, they are being heavily criticized as a matcha latte, a hyper commercialized, visually pleasing but ultimately bland, performative, and stripped of the DNA that made the genre a glow powerhouse to begin with. Western audiences didn't gravitate towards this industry for watered down versions of their own pop stars. They came looking for the theatricality. They came for grand cinematic scale. They came for danger, high concept, wardrobing, and unpredictable art. By discarding their maximalist identity, the current market leaders have actively thrown away their competitive advantage. They left a void, a massive abandoned space where high fantasy cinematic storyline used to live. And that is exactly where we are. But that's all for the matcha latte issue. Next time we are going to break down the 5th generation pivot, the death of lore, the wandering demographic of superfans who have been left behind. But until then, stay locked in, guys, and stay hydrated. Where's my water bottle? Bye. Hey, welcome back. So, in our last session, we discussed the macroeconomic crash, the dilution of identity, the matcha latte era. But to truly understand why, we expand in KRYZAE into the cinematic universe, we have to look at the exact moment the industry abandoned its most powerful weapon. We have to talk about the death of lore. If you look at the titans of the 3rd and 4th generation, they built their empires on elaborate fictional universes, group utilized overarching narratives, time travel timelines, and vampire mythologies that forced audiences to piece together clues across music videos, webtoons, and transmedia properties. It was grand, theoretical, and mythic. But around 2023, industry executives began noting a growing fatigue among casual consumer segments regarding the interpretive labor required to follow these complex storylines. And in the response, the industry completely overcorrected. And that's where the 5th generation enters. These acts are explicitly designed to be simple, accessible, and grounded, completely abandoning intricate lore in favor for everyday youth experience. The market is now dominated by self-defined genres. We are seeing the rise of emotional pop, focusing on raw coming-of-age stories, and boyhood pop rooted in soft, vibrant daily moments. Even groups that initially debuted with contextual motifs like Cupid imagery internationally stripped away the high fantasy elements, presenting the character instead as an amnesiac college student just to ensure the narrative is easily digestible without deeper context. The pivot has fueled subcultural aesthetics like wishcore on TikTok, where fans engage with lighter fashion-centric content. The fifth generation favors short-form video virality over long-form narrative investment, leaning heavily into Y2K nostalgia and casual streetwear rather than the intricate armor and dark fantasy sets we used to see. It generates high streaming numbers and immediate domestic charting, absolutely, but the strategy is an algorithm trap. The fundamental error major labels are making right now is assuming fans consume this genre solely for the music. They don't. It's an identity movement and a comprehensive social system. By chasing viral TikTok trends, companies are prioritizing casual listeners over hardcore evangelists. Consumer psychology dictates two distinct forms of loyalty: behavioral and emotional. Behavioral loyalty is highly transactional. Passive listening on Spotify, driven by algorithm-friendly, easy listening tracks. Emotional loyalty, grounded in deep affections, identification, and a profound sense of shared community. It is emotional loyalty, not behavioral loyalty, that drives the multi-billion-dollar merchandise market and the sold-out global stadium tours and the mass purchasing of physical media. And emotional loyalty is generated through high concept storytelling. When a group debuts with mythic concepts, complete with transmedia lore and intricate symbolism, fans become co-creators and of the cultural product. They edit lore videos, generate spectacle theories, and build an imagined community that transcends traditional entertainment. Without deep lore, companies have desperately tried to maintain this emotional connection through platformization. They built sovereign fan platforms to commodify relational labor, compelling artists to interact continuously with fans via paid messaging services to establish an artificial sense of intimacy. But this is proven to be a fragile substitute. Chat applications sustain a connection, but they do not inspire the fever required to mobilize a global fan base. Relatability scales quickly on social media, but it severely lacks the depth required to sustain a multi-year, highly monetized identity movement. The fans who love the deep lore are not looking for a boy next door to passively stream in the background. They are seeking a new vessel for their emotional investment. The industry hasn't just abandoned a genre, they've abandoned a demographic. But anyways, next time we are going to dive into exactly who that demographic is and the catastrophic timing of the post-successor vacuum. But until then, remember guys, stay locked in, stay hydrated, enjoy the rest of your day. There's barely any water in this. I'm gonna go for this. Bye. Welcome back. Over the last two sessions, we've painted a stock picture of the current industry. We looked at the macroeconomic crash caused by oversaturation, and we've discussed the 5th generation pivot that effectively killed the high fantasy lore we all used to build our communities around. But bad strategy alone doesn't create the kind of unprecedented opportunities we are looking at right now. For an empire to fall, the kings have to leave their throne. We are currently living through what the industry analysts refer to as the post-successor gap. Because of South Korea's mandatory military conscriptions, the industry is experiencing an overlapping mass exodus of the most titanic legacy acts. Between late 2024 and mid 2027, the groups that built the global infrastructure for the genre, the ones that commanded the emotional loyalty of millions, are effectively frozen in suspension. Historically, when a dominant generation steps back, their immediate successors absorb the market share. The fans naturally migrate to the newer shiny objects, but that isn't happening this time. The remigration has failed. Well, why? Because of exactly what we've talked about in the previous episode. The new 5th generation groups were built for passive algorithmic virality. They were built for easy listening and TikTok relatability. But the fans of the legacy acts, the fans whose groups are currently on hiatus, they were raised on cinematic universes. They were raised on massive, intricate lore and mythic storytelling. You cannot feed a matcha latte to an audience that is starving for theatrical, high-stakes movement. This catastrophic mismatch between what the current market is producing and what the core audience actually desires has created something incredibly rare: the wandering demographic. We are talking about millions of highly engaged, emotionally loyal, high-spending superfans who are currently stranded. They have the capital, they have the passion, and they have the desire to build a community, but they have no vessel to pour it into. They are waiting in the dark. They are waiting for something to spark a real fire. The industry conglomerates are so busy fighting each other over the casual behavioral listeners that they have entirely abandoned the most powerful demographic in the world. They left the throne empty. And that is why KRYZAE is expanding its universe. We aren't just debuting a group, we are building the exact cinematic sanctuary this wandering demographic is desperately looking for. We are bringing the lore back. But that's all I have for you today. But next time, we bring it all together. I'm going to look at the strategic matrix. We are going to map out the entire industry on a quadrant, and I will show you the exact coordinates where KRYZAE will strike. But until then, guys, remember, stay locked in and stay hydrated. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. To quantify this unprecedented market opportunity, we have to look at the strategic matrix. This maps the entire current landscape of the industry across two primary axes. Our x-axis represents creative direction, ranging from relatability on the far left to mythic on the far right. The y-axis represents market reach, ranging from a local or niche fan base at the bottom to a massive global stadium touring scale at the top. Let's look at where everyone is right now. The top left quadrant is global and relatable. This is incredibly overcrowded. It is entirely saturated with heavy promoted fifth generation acts like TWS, Boy Next Door, or Rise, alongside hyper westernized global projects. Their market reach is massive, but their concepts are strictly grounded in everyday life. Youthful nostalgia and algorithmic easy listening formats. If you look at the bottom half, you have the local markets. The bottom left is full of casual K indie acts. The bottom right is interesting. Local and mythic. Groups like Kingdom and Pixie exist here. They lean heavily into deep lore and dark fantasy, proving that viability of the concept. But they are restricted to a niche cult status because they lack the major label budget and distribution to achieve global scale. Which brings us to the top right quadrant, global and mythic. Historically, this space was ruled by the absolute titans of the third gen, groups that utilize sprawling time travel universes and dark vampire lores to command millions. But with those legacy groups stalled by multi-year military hiatuses and the fifth generation actively refusing to adopt high fantasy concept, this space is currently completely and utterly empty. This is the post-successor vacuum. And this is exactly why KRYZAE exists. We aren't trying to compete in the crowded top left. We are engineering our group lineup explicitly to dominate the top right. We are building the fandom's new home. When we debut, we are not coming quietly with relatable everyday concepts. We are coming with Supernova, a massive high fantasy cinematic declaration designed to capture the wandering demographic and reignite the lore-driven communities that the industry abandoned. The research is done. The matrix map is mapped, the blueprint is set. Now we build the universe. But that's all. I'll see you guys soon for the next Becoming KRYZAE release. And until then, remember to always rise and always follow your dreams, because there's a huge world out there waiting for you. And remember guys, stay hydrated. Bye.